E aí, Coceira?
Yeah.
But most coaches don't play their cards like that. He even made me an offer yet. He's telling me he's going to make me the top striker in the country. So I'm thinking, all right, well, he's going to have to give me a full ride. How many kids can we get into this program? Means bonuses, means higher revenue. It doesn't go back down into the pyramid of what they're trying to do with their players. And that's why I think you have subpar coaching and you have players who just aren't that good and they're not getting to the level where they could. It all starts from the top.
Other adults that you surround your children with have a greater influence on them after a certain point than you do as a parent.
I'm with your child more than you. So if I'm not teaching them how to be a well-rounded young man or woman, whatever it is, I'm the one responsible for them for a certain period of time. And I'm failing them and their family because they've paid us to be responsible for their child for a period of time.
It's just me, myself, and I. Solo ride until I die, 'cause I got me for life.
Yeah.
Today's guest is better known as Coach Kairo. He grew up in the Toronto area playing for an assortment of teams before moving to the US on a scholarship for a year, then returning to Canada to play at Cape Breton University, where he became the top goal scorer in the country. He was later drafted into the Canadian Premier League, second overall, to FC Edmonton. Since then, Coach Kairo has become a partner at UVU Training, a well-known academy in the Toronto area. This was a special conversation. Coach Kairo and I got into his playing history and many of the experiences that shaped the man and the coach who sat in front of me. But above all else, we connected on values and the philosophy in the world of coaching. I came away impressed by the philosophy that runs as the undercurrent of both Coach Kairo and UVU Training. If you're a parent of a young athlete trying to figure out what's next, or just trying to navigate the confusing world of soccer in Canada, this one's for you. So let's start from the very beginning. Where were you born and raised?
So I was born in Ajax, so right in the Durham region, and I was raised in Whitby, Oshawa.
Okay.
So my parents got divorced pretty early, and one of them was in Whitby, one of them was in Oshawa, so I was bouncing between both. But yeah, I've been Durham all my life.
Awesome, me too.
Yeah.
Me too, I was born in Ajax. Growing up, what club teams did you play for around here?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of bounced around a little bit. I started at Whitby, and funny enough, the first year of rep soccer, I was cut. And then I was crying, I was distraught, and they called me back 2 days later, called my mom back, and they're like, oh, a kid dropped out. If you want to bring Kairo, you can come start. And that was how I got into playing soccer. But after that, I was around Turl, I was around Kicks. I spent maybe the majority of my grassroots age within Ajax during their glory days. And then when it came closer to crunch time, there was a really strong team in Mississauga called Aaron Mills. So I had convinced my mom to commit to driving me an hour plus every night, and I finished at Aaron Mills until I went to university.
Awesome. I remember those glory days for Ajax. Yeah. I remember them well. I played for Ajax as well growing up.
Nice, yeah, so you remember.
Yes. So if you look back in time, what would you attribute to falling in love with the game? Where did that sort of intersect between, as a kid, just playing sports because you're supposed to play sports, and when did you develop that love that became necessary for you to strive towards excelling at it?
I think mine is not the normal route. I think that my love for the sport stemmed from me being pretty good at it. And after that little bump with Whitby, it was kind of like an incline trajectory after that for the next few years. And I liked to be the one who was scoring the goals. I liked the attention of being the main guy on the team. And my love was formed on that. Later on, I learned that was not a healthy relationship to have with the sport, especially when you go through adversity. But originally, my love for the game definitely came from just being a pretty good player in the scope of where I was playing. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that you're honest about that and you can recognize that within yourself and call out that your original relationship wasn't healthy is pretty spectacular, because I mean, I'm sure you've seen it as well. There's grown-ups that haven't been able to decouple and unlearn maybe the story that they told themselves about, you know, why they love something and deeply understand that. So that's pretty profound.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then from there, you ended up going to Cape Breton University?
So actually, I went to a Division II school in Michigan first.
Okay.
So my last year of high school, playing-wise, things were going well. Grades were not the greatest, and I didn't have any guidance or anybody working on my behalf. So I had players I grew up playing with where I'm seeing them commit to big schools, big Division I schools, on good scholarship, and I had nobody pushing me in the direction to have the conversations with the coaches, to send out the emails, to send out the highlight tapes early. And then it got to the point where I took the last SAT that you could to be eligible for the coming fall because I was so far behind. And I was getting ready to either quit the sport fully at 18 or play at a local school and just carry out my education. And I was on a grade 12 or grade 11 field trip for a gym class, and I got a random WhatsApp from a coach. Hey, mate, are you still free or have you signed with the school yet? And I'm looking at it and I'm like, all right, let me just shrug this off. And I responded, and he's like, are you free for a chat? I ended up getting on a call with him. This guy changed my life completely. Shout out to Louis Barrow. So I get on a call with him, and he's like, look, like I really like your profile. I don't know how far along you are in the recruiting process, and I think that I'd like to have you out. And I'm like, okay, cool. He's like, what's your budget? We gave him my budget, which was non-existent. And he's like, okay, mate, sounds good, but you haven't done your SATs. You need to get on that. There was one window left for me to do, and there was none left in Canada. So I had to fly to Florida to go and write my SATs just to be eligible for that scholarship that I had not studied for, mind you. So I go, I do the SATs, I get a good enough grade on it to obtain the scholarship, and that's where I started my post-secondary. I will say it didn't start off smooth when I was there, but eventually I found my feet, and I ended up as Rookie of the Year. I scored a lot of goals in the conference, and that was when I started to garner the interest from the Division I schools and ultimately Cape Breton, where I ended up going.
Wow, that's very unconventional. Mm-hmm. And but the fact that you committed to flying all the way to Florida to write the last one, and you didn't stay. I'm not going to ask what your score was, but it was clear. It was clearly sufficient to.
It's good enough.
It's good enough. Yeah. You know, it's the old saying is, you know, what do you call a doctor who barely passed their exam?
A doctor.
Doctor. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
So that's awesome. So then you go to Cape Breton, mm-hmm. and what happens there? So
I might preface this by saying, for those of you who don't know, there's a transfer portal in the NCAA. So after I had my year at the school in Michigan called SVSU, I had entered the portal, and I was even getting support from that coach. He was using his relationships to say, oh, this coach is looking for a striker, like it might be a good fit, which he does not have to do. The technical director or the athletic director of that university, they said that once players entered the portal, you're no longer a player here. You cannot come back if you don't find an option. So it was like a do or die thing. I didn't have a home there anymore. It wasn't up to the coach. So he was doing his best to make sure I had the opportunities to go elsewhere. So I was very close to committing to, it came down to 3 schools, 2 Division I schools, and then somehow Cape Breton had convinced me. The coach is a very convincing guy, great coach as well. And he had just sold me on, look, Kairo, the CPL is new. You will come here and be the best. I will make you the best striker in the country. And like verbatim, I still have the text message. And I remember looking at it, I'm like, this guy's kind of crazy, but I like it. So I ended up committing there. Everybody was like, what are you doing? The route was to go to the States, not to come back home. And that was a little bit of a troublesome time as well, because I was going back and forth with people, with old coaches, with myself. Like, is this what I want to do? But that coach had shown so much belief in me that I was like, okay, like this might be a good fit. And I wanted to be professional. That was like my thing. And any other conversation I'd have with the coaches in the States, it's like, oh, you know, Kairo, you come, you do well, anything's possible. The coach from Cape Breton was like, I will make you a professional. And I'm like, okay, like, let me go with that. So to make a long story short, I ended up going to Cape Breton. I didn't score. I'm a striker. I did not score for my first 5 games. And I'm like, my season's written off, not getting drafted. I should have went to the States. And you're having these mental battles. And then there was one game, something clicked because I was getting close, but I just couldn't capitalize. And I scored 4 goals in that one game. And after that, I ended up with 19 on the season as a top goal scorer in the whole country. And that season was what got me drafted into the Canadian Premier League, which is where I started playing professionally.
Wow. There's something, I think, really special in what that coach clearly did for you. And I think it's something that coaches don't fully understand, the power that they have. And, parents have the same power in that when you believe in somebody and they truly understand that you believe in them, it can change everything. Everything. And, I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit later once we get into the depths of coaching itself. Mm-hmm. But there's a huge responsibility there. Yeah. For coaches. Yep. And of course, there's an honesty component. It's not just to say, to tell people what they want to hear. It has to be sincere. It has to be authentic. But there's a real responsibility there to, if you do believe in a young person, is to make sure they know.
That's it. It was the difference. I went. I had a great time. But most coaches don't play their cards like that, because at that point he hadn't even made me an offer yet, and he's telling me he's going to make me the top striker in the country. So I'm thinking, all right, well, he's going to have to give me a full ride, otherwise this isn't happening. So he was vulnerable in that regard. It worked out for him, and then I had a coach who believed in me, and it ended up working out for myself as well.
That's amazing. And here in Canada.
Here in Canada,
which is something that I don't know how long that's been a possibility for, but the fact that it's really starting to exist is amazing. Yeah. For Canadian soccer.
Absolutely. It's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so once you go to Cape Breton, how many seasons do you play there?
I played about a season and a half season, because I came back to finish my undergrad after I was playing in the Canadian Premier League. And I was injured. My last game that I played in the CPL, I got injured. And then I went straight back to school to finish my degree that fall. Tried to nurse my ankle as best as I could, and I got the latter end of the season, but I played a full season and then maybe a half and some change.
Okay, so excuse my ignorance because I don't know enough about the CPL and how it works. Mm-hmm. Are you kind of able to toggle between playing in the CPL and still being in school? Or is it like you have to leave school?
Yeah. They've made it to where you can be a U Sports University athlete and compete in the Canadian Premier League and not lose your eligibility. Because what people don't understand, and I'm trying to tell so many families now, is that at one point the ball's going to stop rolling and you need to get your education. So the CPL made it in a very, very smart way to where their athletes can compete at a professional level and still have their eligibility to obtain their degree, keep their scholarship, and not handicap themselves after they're done playing at 25, 26, whatever the case is. God willing, longer than that. But for many, it's not that long. So what do you have after you're done playing?
Yeah. That's actually something that I want to get into later, because I have a bit of a thesis to share with you on that. But okay, so how many years are you playing in the Canadian Premier League?
I only did 1 year in the CPL.
Okay.
And then I did 2 years abroad.
Okay, where did you go?
I went to New Zealand.
Nice.
And then I went to Australia.
Okay.
2 really, really different experiences, but very, very impactful memories on my life. So it was a good time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't know enough about the opportunities that exist down there.
Mm-hmm. Down under.
Unintended. But what was the culture, like the footballing culture, like down there?
Honestly, it's sad because Canada is behind countries that they're ahead of, if that makes sense. We have a stronger infrastructure than New Zealand does, but their fans get behind them more. They have a better pro and semi-pro culture. They have a bigger, passionate fan base. Australia is a different beast because you have so many of the Europeans and the Africans and the Asians that all migrated to Australia. It's similar to Canada as in it's a mixing pot, but they kept that same love for the sport and you could feel it in games. Clubs are run by families. Everybody's getting good wages at multiple levels, which is not a thing here. So if you look at it, you can say Canada and Australia are close in terms of the gap in their level. I'd still say Canada is above them, but in terms of what they're doing for players, opportunities, fans, culture, it is still superior in Australia, which is just not nice.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And the analysis is interesting in of itself because the way you could decouple that and peel it apart, recognizing that what they're doing for the players, and of course, so much of that, the wages, it's predicated on the fan base. This is something I tell Canadians here, like, hey, if we want to keep building the game, we have to be consumers of the game here in Canada.
I don't want to hear that, though.
Oh, we have some responsibility.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But we do. We have to consume the game here. We have to support it. And even if that's just being a fan and showing up. Now, I'm curious because I was having a conversation recently with some friends, and we were sort of doing a bit of analysis of Canadian soccer and some of the challenges.
Yep.
Is it possible, and could you attribute at least some of the gap between Australia and Canada in that sense down and sort of put it down, at least in part, to the weather? Because we are at a pretty big disadvantage here because of the winter and our ability to play, year round
Yep.
and all of that. We have to strategically condense our seasons to adapt to the weather and stuff like that, which makes it a lot harder for the fans, for the players, and so forth.
Yeah, I would have to agree with what you guys were saying. It's difficult because there's only so many domes, there's only so many indoor facilities, and they're expensive. So the same amount of teams that they might have in Australia, we're competing for field time at a much more limited rate compared to them because it just stays outside all year. I will say, though, that I wouldn't fully attribute it to the weather. There are certain things beyond that I think could change. Like if we want to stay on the topic of Australia, the money that the clubs make for grassroots pays their coaches and then it pays their players for their men's team. In Canada, the money from grassroots is lining whoever owns the club or the board or whatever it is. And that was interesting for me because players were getting paid a very good wage, a very competitive wage in Australia. They have 5 or 6 tiers that you can go and make good money. So the grassroots, the house leagues, the rep, the funds that the clubs are allocating for that are going back to the players who are playing in their men's team that they're bringing the whole club to get around. So they create a culture within the club, and it's an ecosystem within the club that they are funding themselves, and it gives kids the opportunity to hopefully climb the ranks. It gives parents a community to get behind and to see that there's an opportunity. And then it gives coaches an environment to where they can coach at a high level and still make a good living doing it.
Yeah, that's very interesting because that's kind of another conversation I was having was about, a lot of people talk about the pay to play, right? And there's a lot of criticism in North America about that. And one of the things that I've found when looking at this from like a basic economic standpoint, if we look at Europe, in Europe, we have multi-tiers.
Yep.
It's merit-based, so there's promotion and relegation.
Yep.
There's an aligned incentive structure that you want to win because you get promoted, and you don't want to lose because then you lose revenue,
Yep.
you lose money. And what ends up happening is because players are bought and sold, their interests are aligned with the club. So the two are working in this sort of like symbiotic nature of like the interests are the same. And then the money ends up going down to grassroots where they don't have pay to play because there's an incentive structure where clubs can make money by developing players. So they're willing to invest in developing players because if they do well, they get to sell them later. So it's a little bit ironic that Europe has a bit more of a capitalistic structure than North America. And when it comes to pay to play in North America, it's because we actually don't have a capitalist structure and the money from our professional teams doesn't make its way down to the grassroots. And so the consequence of that is in Europe, no one pays to play. Here, you have to pay to play. But that's the conditions that we've created for ourselves. So everyone will say, and you'll hear European players come over and immediately say like, oh, I can't believe you have to pay to play here. It's one of the first things I remember when I went overseas, they said. And you know, on the surface, you might think like, well, that doesn't make sense. We don't want to create, you know, a financial barrier of entry for players. And so that's where the criticism is. But we don't get to decide how that game is being played. And so in my opinion, until professional teams were allowed to have multi-tiers, there's, you know, they're not protected, they can get relegated, and there's actual investment all the way down, it's going to always remain pay to play. But that's interesting that the pay to play model is sort of from the ground up in Australia, which is a little bit different in that it's still pay to play, but it's funding the future or potential future for those players. Yeah,
it's really interesting. But like you have to think about it. If you look at the clubs in Ontario and the GTA, their biggest moneymaker is house league. The majority of the time it's house league. You have so many kids, it's volume. So where's that money going? Is it funding the development of the older age groups? In some clubs' cases, yeah. In many, it's not. So how many kids can we get into this program? Means bonuses, means higher revenue. It doesn't go back down into the pyramid of what they're trying to do with their players. And that's why I think you have subpar coaching and you have players who just aren't that good and they're not getting to the level where they could. It all starts from the top and makes its way down.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's created the conditions that we find ourselves today here in the GTA, where we have I don't know exactly what it's called, but we have basically new clubs, new academies, and they're being created as a response and a solution to the things that are not happening intentionally. So we haven't really got into it, but you have UVU Training. As an academy. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so UVU is a training academy. In a nutshell, we run anything from private sessions to camps to team programs. Everything soccer we try to do. I say that we are different to clubs because we are the ones who are making the decisions. So we're players first, we're coaches second, and we understand what the player needs to develop. Our intentions are trying to make the kids as good as possible, because if we do not, we don't have customers. If we're not developing players, if players don't feel like they're improving or they're getting any value, we don't have customers. When you have the big clubs, I'm not going to name any, but no matter what, they have a funnel, an unlimited funnel of players, because, oh yeah, Billy played for XYZ House League when he was forward, it's going to put you in that. It just continuously funnels into the same programs. If we don't perform, we do not get athletes. And I think that's why the unsanctioned world is so attractive to many. It's because, again, like if the customer does not feel like their child is improving, they do not stay with us. They wouldn't come to us. Other times, it's like, I'm at this club because I want to tell my colleagues that my son plays at this club and they play at this level. No one's improving. So it's like, pick your poison. What do you want to do?
Yeah, and that's an economic structure that we know beyond the game in the real world, outside of it, is necessary to succeed.
Yeah.
As soon as we create institutional guardrails that put moats around castles, we've got issues. It's the freedom, the free market idea is that your incentive structure is to develop players. Otherwise, as you said, you lose customers. And so that means every parent that brings their child to you, there's a voluntary exchange of value.
Yeah.
You're developing their child in exchange for said value.
Yeah.
And I think that's for someone like me, an entrepreneur and a capitalist in its purest form, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It's voluntary. It's an exchange of value, and no one's forced. No one's being manipulated. It's it's as pure as it can be.
Yeah.
And I have to assume there's no 1-year contracts. I don't know a lot, but I've heard that people get contracted in to other teams and can't leave.
I mean, I don't know how much I'll get into that with clubs.
Sure.
But if you brought your child to sign up for XYZ FC, that's for either the winter season or the year. And if you want to leave, you often have to go to somebody above the coach to get some form of a release to where you're not subject to paying the rest of your fees. Because now it's on a month-to-month for most cases. When I was playing, it was like, okay, your fees are $2,500, find it and pay it by this date. So now it's chunked up, which is a lot better for the player and the family and the customer. But yeah, if you do sign up for a club, then you're stuck unless somebody lets you out of that agreement.
Right. We don't have to get into it, but I'm happy to say that baffles me.
Yeah.
For a child. I mean, in business, I'm accustomed to contracts.
Yeah.
But not with children.
Yeah. So, well, we'll probably get into it in terms of coaching, but like we don't own any players. In Europe, that's not the case. We do not own any players in Canada. And the priority is, while you have the player, how are you going to make them better? It's quite simple. It's a very simple framework. Players come and go at every level of soccer. They might stay for 2 seasons. They might stay all their way through grassroots. But while you have them, what are you doing? What are you setting them up for in life outside of the sport? And I think that's the difference between what we've been doing at UVU and what a lot of our competitors do is growing up, you see players who are good, but they're just bad people. And I'm not trying to make bad people. So yeah, I've enjoyed unsanctioned. I've enjoyed coaching. It's been good, but I got to make sure that these little humans are going to be able to contribute in a positive manner in society outside of just the sport. Because as I said, the sport is going to end for everybody. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's something that I've heard coaches talk about, but it's not always the most authentic part. You can tell that's maybe not at the core of what they're trying to do. Conversely, I can see that here with you, which I think, just before we got on the mics, we were talking about, where character, virtues, and attributes, the things that build and form good humans, are one of the most important parts of what you can learn within the game. And there's an intentionality that has to happen with coaches and with parents in working harmoniously towards developing that player. And sports and athletics and soccer specifically, but all sports is a beautiful sandbox, if you will, for developing all of those characteristics and attributes that will allow you to be successful in every part of life.
Absolutely.
So I have this thesis because I remember when I was going through my time, everyone talked about Plan B.
Yeah.
And I totally see the merits of Plan B. And then you hear some hyper successful people say, you got to burn the boats.
Yeah, burn the boats.
You got to burn the boats. Whatever you plan for, you fall back on, and so forth. And so I can appreciate that as well. And so there's a bit of a dichotomy parents and coaches wrestle with their players and so forth. So my thesis that I've sort of landed on, and this kind of in a way became true for me because I said no to a scholarship. I didn't go to school, at least initially, and I pursued the professional dream of trying to go to Europe.
Yeah.
And I failed, okay?
Yeah.
But what plan B was, and I didn't realize this at the time, plan B was the person I became in the pursuit of my dream. And so for parents, one of the things that I try and help them realize, because you have to run both things concurrently. Instead of running concurrently like, okay, my kid's playing and they have a good chance, maybe they'll make it collegiate into NCAA, maybe they could make it professionally, but I also have to consider whatever they do next.
Yeah.
Go all in on the dream and intentionally use that to help them become the person that they can through all of the trials and tribulations they'll experience along the way, you know, the problems that they'll have to solve, all of the things that they can learn. And then when it's time, the person they become is what's actually going to lead them to the success in whatever the next thing is. They don't have to know what that thing is yet.
Yep.
The person they become, because once you've developed that person and you have, you know, a sufficient level of courage and work ethic and humility, all the things that we were talking about prior, you get to deploy all of those resources against whatever you want to be. You want to be a firefighter, you want to become a soldier, things that are, you know, careers that I've gone into, or an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter where you want to work. If you have those things, once you decide and you're like, okay, well, now I have to learn the technical skills of that job. I don't want to oversimplify, but it's way easier.
Yeah.
It's way easier.
I agree. I mean, yeah. How are you meant to deal with adversity if you've never been in a situation to equip you for that? And that is what soccer is. So I always say to parents, whether they're in soccer, have them in something to where they're going to be pushed to a mental or physical, in a mental or physical way. And it's going to build their character, which will stay with them when they're done doing whatever that activity or sport is. So that's the most important thing in my books.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, within that, there's challenges because it's easy enough for us to say those things. One of the other things that we were talking about is some of the work that we're trying to do, which is working with parents, because, you know, it's easy for me to say that plan B can be the person that the player becomes, but they can't become that person if the parent doesn't first become that person themselves.
Yes.
It's like in any leadership, whether you're a coach, a teacher, you're the leader of a business, CEO, or any executive, it all starts with you.
Yeah.
You have the responsibility on your shoulders to become whatever you want them to become.
That's it.
Same thing is true for parenting, and most especially parents of athletes.
Yes. So yeah, just to touch on what you were mentioning with parent education, like that's a huge thing for me. I have ushered parents outside of my program. I've ushered parents inside of my program. I've told parents that they might be better off going somewhere else for the development of their child, and explained exactly why that is. I think there is a bit of an elitist mindset when it comes to a lot of these clubs, to where the coach can't talk to parents. They're untouchable. And I just don't necessarily agree with that, because then you're keeping people ignorant. And they might leave your institution, leave your club, and they go to another one, and they still have that same mindset to where they're either going to hurt their child's development or they're going to annoy a coach because they don't know how to deal with confrontation, or my child's not playing right now. How do I deal with this? Or I'm considering going to another club. What is the best thing for me to do? So I open up my phone to any parent, and I have conversations where I'm like, look, like in my honest opinion, I think that's a good idea, or I don't think that's a good idea. And then I'll explain why, so that hopefully they can share that information with their friends who are other parents, and the cycle of ignorance in this sport stops.
Yeah, it's so important. And you brought up something interesting about like the elitist mentality on some clubs. One of the that's kind of representative of things you might see in Europe at big professional clubs.
Yep.
And so I understand that we've thought that it might be a good idea to adopt a lot of the things from Europe. But another thing that you had brought up about players being in contract in Europe, I can't criticize that in Europe because they're investing in your child. If I'm paying for you to play and I'm pouring my coaching staff and resources into you, and then absolutely we should sign a contract where our interests are mutually aligned. But here you have to sign a contract and be the one to pay.
Yeah.
That's
funny, eh?
That's not the European way.
Yeah.
And then there's that elitist mentality of, coaches off limits. In Europe, I understand that. It makes sense. Here, that's not the case. And we need coaches to be more willing to shepherd parents and players along the journey because there's no roadmap. I said this to you, like I've gone through it. And what are the chances that my dad has 2 more children, both become excellent soccer players and are on the same pathway that I was on? Parents don't usually get 2 kicks at the can.
No.
And even still, they've had moments of fumbling, missteps, decisions that they probably regret on the journey. And he had all of the information from me coming through, 2 decades prior.
Yeah.
And so, it's understandable for parents, but then that's where coaches have to be an available resource.
Yeah. That's what we are. Like, I consider myself to be a servant to the community. And I think all coaches are. I've realized in my short time coaching that I'm more impactful in families' lives than maybe I'd like to admit. Because, as you said, you want your kids to be happy. And if your child is having a good time playing at a certain club, that's going to make you happy. So if I have kids and I'm responsible for them and their well-being and their development on the field, if they're having a good time, if they're improving, the family's happy. So I think a lot of coaches I don't think it's an ignorance. I think it's just like an ignoring. We just don't want to admit that we are more impactful than maybe we want to admit. Outside of the teachers, we spend as much time with the kids as some of the parents do. I have a lot of kids who they go to school, they'll go eat, they come train, they go home, they sleep. So when are you seeing your parents? I'm with your child more than you. So if I'm not teaching them how to be a well-rounded young man or woman, whatever it is, and I'm the one responsible for them for a certain period of time, then I'm failing them and their family because they've paid us to be responsible for their child for a period of time. And I think that's really interesting with a lot of the coaches and the scope that we have here in Canada.
Yeah, and just like we were talking about prior, you touched on all the most important components. There's some studies that have been done, and I can't cite them exactly, but the summary of the study is that the people, the other adults that you surround your children with have a greater influence on them after a certain point than you do as a parent.
I'm not surprised.
So your job as a parent is to be hyper selective about the adults in the room.
Yeah.
And that's a huge responsibility. And so, kind of tying it back to another part of our conversation, which is, so if you're a parent, personal development, you got to get to work.
Yeah.
You got to be able to decouple your ego and your identity tied to your child, because your job is to select the right person so they can become the best person they can, first and foremost, then their athletic development. Then, if it all works out and, they're playing with a club or a team that you get to go brag about at work, then great. But you can't invert that order of priority.
Yeah, I agree. I think the peak age for this is like 8 to 12, because we hear high performance. That word is thrown around quite often. What does high performance mean? Okay, when you're in college and you're playing as a collegiate athlete, you are a high-performing athlete. When you're a professional, you are a high-performing athlete. When you're borderline close to that, you're a high-performing athlete. When you're 8 to 12, you are not. And I think that gets lost in translation with coaches because ultimately you can't run things strictly like a drill sergeant. You can be stern. And I'm young, so I'm not like, I've had very, very old school coaches who don't take any nonsense, and I've learned things from that. But there has been also a lot that came from that was not positive for my own betterment as a child. So as you were saying, like, I just think it's really important to own in on what characteristics your children are getting from the adult that they're around. And if they're able to garner that in a way to benefit their athletics, it's a plus. Everything else from that should be your priority. Because do you want your kid to be a bad person and a great footballer? Or do you want your kid to be a good person and a good footballer in tandem? It has to work together. If you want the other one, then I'm not the person for you. But that's my MO. That's what I think.
Yeah, and that's perfect. And the fact that you're so clear on that and willing to say, well, then I'm not your person, that's perfect. Mm-hmm. You know, in the business world, which, you know, this is directly connected to, right? There's like, we just talked about the economics behind it and all of that. That's exactly it is. You need to be very clear with who's your ideal avatar as a customer and be very clear with them of where you can solve their problems, what's the value that you can provide them. And if you can't, say so. And then they get the choice to determine whether you're delivering on those things, which pushes you to stay focused and deliver on those things. Yeah. And, you know, for all those that like to criticize that, you know, the pay-to-play model or whatever, this is exactly why it's beautiful. Yeah. This is exactly why it's beautiful.
This is it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So how did UVU start? Where was the beginning of that and why?
So the founder is named Skylar Thomas, and he grew up in Durham, grew up playing at Ajax, and he got a scholarship to go to Syracuse. Syracuse, he was drafted to TFC, and that's where he started his professional career. When he was in the latter years of his career, he was trying to think what's next, and he started running private sessions, like one-on-one with players, which turned into group sessions, which then formed into what it is now. I was brought on board a few years ago, and while I was still playing, and I just fell in love with coaching. I knew that my time was coming to an end, and it was kind of like, okay, I still want to be involved in this sport. I feel like I can make an impact in this sport and share the info that I never, ever had access to. And Skylar and I have been kind of working with each other since then, as well as our other partner. But it's been great. But he is the creator. This is his baby that we've now worked together on and brought it to what it is today.
Amazing. How many kids do you guys coach approximately?
Full-time, we have about 80 kids. And then we have programs where kids come sporadically, such as PA day camps, summer camps, finishing clinics, etc. So those kids we might see once or twice a month, but kids that we're seeing on a weekly basis, about 80 kids.
Wow. That's a big responsibility.
It is. Believe me, it is. But I love it, man. Like, I love it. It's a lot of fun.
Good. And you take it seriously.
Absolutely.
And then in addition to that, you have your own sort of personal brand as Coach Kairo. Yeah. And tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Coach Kairo started, honestly, maybe 8 years ago under a different name. It was called Envision the Goal. And I was inspired by a soccer creator by the name of Matt Sheldon. And he would post drills, tips, and he was a pro. And we would watch his journey as a pro. And I loved it, everything about it. I loved to see the behind the scenes of him at an off-season game, or what he was doing in training the day before he has a game. It was fascinating to me. So I was at a point where I was just entering college, and I'm like, okay, maybe I know a bit more than players younger than me. I can just share what I'm doing. And I started doing that. ended up taking a break from it and starting up again just this year. But the whole point of Coach Kairo is information accessible to everybody. Everybody has a phone nowadays. And a lot of my players will come up to me, or parents actually, Jimmy doesn't know what to train on at home. What can we do? Now I have a plethora of resources in one place where they can come and say, okay, like his first touch isn't the greatest. Here's one drill that he can do. And I'm a parent who doesn't know anything about the sport. I just need to show them the video and they can run through it. So the whole point of Coach Kairo was to make as much information accessible to as many people as possible. And that's kind of where it is now.
That's amazing. I was hoping that's where you're going to go with that because, in addition to all of the wonderful things that, we talked about in terms of like economics and, I mentioned capitalism, there is an accessibility problem at times.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you've recognized that and you can see that and, you're working to make accessibility or you're solving for accessibility in that way is amazing.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is we have more information now than we've ever had. And I have to imagine this is true for you. I know it was for me and my brothers who are still playing is when you're striving to achieve that level, you can go to as many practices as you want, but you got to be putting in work at home.
You have to. And there's a disconnect with that nowadays. And we can go back to what we spoke about off camera, like that innate grit that players nowadays we don't have. I think that just comes down to privilege. And you always want your kids to get better than what you had. And we're now living in a generation where those parents are providing more to their kids than the previous generations. So if you have absolutely everything when you go home from school and when you go home from training and you have the newest cleats, the newest shin pads, whatever it is, exactly, who's pushing you? Where is your drive? Do you have that intrinsic drive? Or is it being fueled by something else? But tying it back to the training at home thing, I try to hold my personal players accountable and I try to give my players homework. And now I have the ability of doing that because I have a place where there's so much content and so much information, they can access it. Side note, I'm working on a school community to where all of that is kind of even more simplified in one place, to where kids can come and they have their whole module base. They can go through the entire, call it semester of school, to where they have things to do at home on a regular basis. They have other people holding them accountable, and they can go to their team trainings better equipped than they would without it.
That's amazing. I definitely want to hear more about that, probably off camera.
For sure.
But because you don't want to give too much away. We were talking about working from home, work ethic, and all of that kind of stuff. And so one of the things that I've seen as I've scrolled through Instagram in the sort of algorithm of sports experts and stuff like that, I see a lot of things about playing multi-sports and not pigeonholing your child and having all the other things outside of sports still operating. And I think there's some truth in those things sometimes in certain spaces.
Yes.
One of the caveats, I think, is the sport that we love. I think no offense to football players, baseball players, UFC fighters, I love UFC, but you can become an athlete in those sports later in life.
Correct.
I don't know any professional soccer player that became a professional after starting or picking up the game at like 15 years old.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. And so conversely, that's true for, the other sports I just mentioned. You can become a professional if you pick it up late in life. For football, real football, for soccer, you have to be training at a young age. The technical skill required, and I've argued this with so many people, that soccer requires the highest level of technical skill over any other sport. You can't just pick it up at 15 years old and think you can develop the skills, and you have to pour yourself into it. Now, if you don't want to become a professional, you don't want to become a high-performing collegiate athlete like you were just describing, then sure, that's fine. Do whatever you want to do. But if you do want those things, the reality is you're going to have to work really, really hard, be very resilient, develop sufficient amount of grit in pursuit of that. And it has to start at a young age.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I see it on a day-to-day. I have players who tell me what they want, what their goals are, and there's no correlation to what they do when they're off the pitch. Parents will tell me they want this for their child, but the kid isn't the one who's driving it. And again, it comes down to what the player themselves is willing to do and if they want to do it themselves. I have some players now who they are really putting in work at home and they're being rewarded when they're playing in games and when they're training with their team, and it's evident that they're putting in the work at home. And then I have players who are not. And eventually there's going to be a bigger discrepancy between the two, especially as they get older. But I agree with what you're saying. If they can get that at a young age, they're setting themselves above their peers. I have a friend, I'll shout him out as well. He started playing late. And as you said, it's very difficult to come into the sport late because technically you are so far behind. He quite literally worked twice as hard to get to the baseline that everybody was at. And he ended up getting a scholarship, which he was never meant to do. It was never his story to do that, but he changed the trajectory of his career by putting in an insane amount of work by himself, spending hours at the wall, always would be down to train. And I don't necessarily see that from every player now. I didn't see it from every player then, but that's the difference between those who are really going to push on and those who are just going to play and get what they get out of the game until they're around 18.
Yeah, and if we go back to what I was saying about the plan B, it sounds like a lot because you're making these monstrous sacrifices at a very young age. When I look back in my life and my career, I made crazy sacrifices in retrospect, but that was necessary in order to even get close enough to fail.
Yeah.
Right? And so, my whole life was football. With my friends, everything we did, I sacrificed everything you can imagine. And I know you know exactly what that means. Just to get a chance to maybe succeed and fail. But having done that, I got an education.
Yep.
I learned at 12 that I need to say no to going to a birthday party for my friends because I need to go train.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? When you get older and you have a career and you want to be successful in whatever that career is, you have to make sacrifices. There's trade-offs. Everything in life requires trade-offs.
Yeah.
And if you're learning about the importance of trade-offs at 10, 11, 12, amazing.
Yeah.
And sometimes parents need to push their kids through those challenging moments. And hopefully on the other side, they get there. Now it shouldn't be every time. If week in and week out, you have to push your kid through,
Yeah.
maybe they don't want it. The odd moment where they feel so overwhelmed and they don't know what to do with it and they just need a nudge to get out the door and actually show up to training. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Because
that's part of them when they feel like they need to quit, showing them that they didn't actually need to quit. It's the same as if they're going for a run and they're like, okay, I'm tired and they want to stop. No, keep going.
Yeah.
Once you start to learn that, okay, your mind is going to tell you things that your body needs to not listen to.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. And so there is that component for the parenting too, but learning trade-offs early is incredible.
It's huge. Every dream is at the other side of sacrifice. And I learned that quick. And a lot of people in my personal friend group never really understood it because I never drank, I never smoked, I never would go out. And when you're a freshman at a big American school where there's a huge American football culture, that is what comes with it. So when they're having their parties and I'm stretching in my room, my teammates even are looking at me crazy. But I had a goal in mind. And the sacrifice of even being away from home, people don't understand. I've missed my dad's wedding. I've missed birthdays. I've missed funerals. My family members have had ailments. And you can't just stop what you're doing and go. On top of the fact that you can't allow it to dwindle what you're doing. So adversity is like the best byproduct of soccer. It's amazing because now I feel like I can take on anything head on and continue on with my day-to-day in the best way I possibly can. It didn't come easy, but if I didn't have the sport, it might not have ever come. Now that I'm back into university and I'm seeing how other people who never have been in athletics function and think, it's baffling. Any little thing, they get psyched out for it. And I feel like the sport has just changed my mindset and my perspective to see that things are a lot easier outside of the sport than a lot of people think.
Yeah. So I'm curious because you said you're back in university and you're doing an MBA in education, correct?
I'm doing my bachelor's of education.
Bachelor of education.
Yeah, so
okay.
teacher's college.
And so you're studying things like child psychology, child development, and stuff like that. So one of the things that I've been really interested in is if we look at, the discussion we're having, you and I have taken incredible lessons from the game. It's been a teacher for us. But I'm sure we both know, and I do anyways, know people that didn't get the same things out of the game. What do you think that's attributed to?
That's a great question. I think that's a multi-layered question. I think privilege is one thing, but it's deeper than that as well. Because I've had friends growing up who opportunities came from their dads pushing on their behalf when my dad did not know anything about the sport. So you can call that a one-up. You have parents who could afford to send their children on trips and experiences and tryouts. You can call that another one-up. And then you have geographical things in your location. Where are you based? That's another one. So there are many things that can make a difference and make an impact in how likely your child is to succeed. I think that you need to just identify what your current situation is and then pivot from there because everybody's is different.
Yeah. So I guess one of the things that I'm trying to unpack. So I have friends, for example, that I played with, really wonderful people. They did really well within the game. They put forth a ton of effort, the resilience and grit they displayed on the pitch. But unfortunately, it didn't translate into the other parts of their life.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out why that is. Why was I so lucky that I got to learn this? The same thing happened to me when I was leaving the military.
Yep.
I could hear a lot of people that I knew were leaving at the same time as me. And our understanding of our experience, of what we get to take with us, was vastly different. We were countries apart in terms of, the formative experience and how it's changed us and our understanding of the world and how we look at things and simple things of how it can translate professionally into the next thing that we do. And so one of the things that, I don't know if you have anything for that topic off the top of your head, but it's an interesting thing because you clearly did as well. And again, I have other friends that did, but then I also have lots that didn't.
Yeah. I would say, for me personally, I think of identity. And I was so obsessed with this sport. I still love it, but I was obsessed with this sport. I think I reached a higher level than I should have in theory. And I was the tip of the iceberg of what professional soccer looks like. I'm not claiming to have been Ronaldo or play in the Premier League. But who are you outside of the sport? And I really struggled with that when I transitioned out of playing because I've just been Kairo the soccer player. Everybody knows me as Kairo the soccer player. Now what? And you kind of have to look within and see who you really are. What do you value? Who do you want to be outside of the sport? It's funny that I'm still in the sport, but going from playing to a coaching role, it was not an easy transition for me. I still see my friends playing, and I'm like, oof, like I wish I was still, it would be still nice to be kicking the ball around and playing at the highest level. And I have players in the World Cup right now who I grew up playing against. And I'm like, wow, like fine margins got them there, but it's identity. When you're done playing, who are you? Who do you want to be? And what did you gain from this sport that you can take with you? I think I can go back to what you were saying earlier on the balance between being in the sport completely and then having them as a multi-sport athlete or having them in the arts or something. I grew up playing the piano and I hated it. And there was nothing I hated more than coming home. My grandma's like, get on the piano and start practicing. You got your 30 minutes to put in, because it wasn't cool. There was nothing cool about it at the time. And looking back, now that I can say I'm classically trained in the piano and it was a life skill that I learned, it's amazing. But it was something outside of soccer that I had to look at and that I later started to enjoy, which helped build my identity and help me understand who I am outside of just kicking a ball around.
Yeah, I think I would totally agree with you. And that identity component is kind of actually where I came up with that sort of plan B thesis of like, go all in, the person you become is the plan B. And, you know, I remember going from Daniel, the soccer player, to just Daniel. And then the same thing happened with Daniel, the soldier, to just Daniel again. And the transition is really, really hard.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I'm still trying to figure it out. It's not fully formed thoughts.
Believe me.
But you know, the thing that I've landed on so far is that the person you become through the sport is your identity, not the sport itself.
Yeah.
Not the uniform.
Yeah.
Regardless of the uniform, it's not that thing. You know, in the military, of course, in athletics, a lot of discipline. As everyone knows, the same thing's true in the military. And so, like, Daniel has discipline, not Daniel the soldier.
Yes.
I might have developed it as Daniel the soccer player, refined it as Daniel the soldier, but it's still mine.
Yeah. Doesn't go.
Doesn't go. It doesn't have to go. Doesn't have to.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of people leave it behind, as if it was only a consequence of the uniform, and their uniform was tied to who they were, and then they took it off, and it's like, well, who am I now? And what I'm working on now is that, well, you're Daniel with discipline, with extreme work ethic, and all of these things, and then those things get to be applied to every other part of your life.
Yeah.
That being said, I don't want to oversimplify the challenge of that identity when you take off that jersey for the first time and you have to make that transition. It's not nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I mentioned to you before, like, one thing that I always say to parents is soccer is the pathway, it's not the destination. So you will always be able to benefit from being in the sport, but if you treat it as the be-all, end-all, and there's nothing past this, as a human, you're going to suffer. Because when it's done, you have nothing to hold on to. And I experienced things from that. I have friends who are experiencing and have experienced that as well. And I have friends who are still playing that I know will struggle with it when they're done playing. I had the conversation with one of my good friends who's still playing professionally in Scotland. And he's a great player, great player. And he's now finally starting to think about what's going to happen when he's done. What's next? Even though he still probably has at least another 5 years playing professionally at a high level, he's trying to think about, okay, like, it's going to eventually end, but when you're in it, you have blinders on. You have blinders on, and you never want to see what's outside of those blinders. So I think it's important to just think about who you are, even when you're in it. So when you're done, you have an idea of, all right, I'm Kairo. I'm not just Kairo, the soccer player. And that'll make the transition a lot easier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Take a bit of a pivot to the World Cup.
Nice.
So it's here in Canada, North America. We talked about things like, the economics of it, the pay to play, the moats around those big castles that we have here. But from your perspective and young Kairo, how significant is it that the World Cup's here and Canada is in the World Cup for the second time?
It's huge. It is honestly huge. I wish that I got to go see a game. I had tickets for England-Ghana in Boston, and I ended up selling them to one of my American friends. He's going with his dad, but it's massive. This sport is going to benefit solely off of just exposure and people being exposed to the game who wouldn't have been otherwise. I saw a video from an MLB game yesterday, and the Scottish fans were in town from their game, and they went to go watch the game, and everyone was shocked by the atmosphere. That's what soccer is. There's no sport like it. So I think that from the grassroots up, there's going to be a big positive effect of having the World Cup here.
Yeah, I think back for myself, and I couldn't see Canada being in a World Cup or even being here. So, one of the challenges is, when you can't see yourself fully as a Canadian playing at a professional level. And now we have a team full of players playing at the highest level, which is so amazing. It makes me so happy because I didn't think that was ever possible. Obviously, I was, young and naive and stuff like that. Like, anything's possible. And I held on to that for myself. Like, maybe there's a chance that I could be the exception. But it's a whole lot different when, the pathway feels more possible, or feels more real when you see Canadians living the dream. For me, it felt like there wasn't a ton of us out there. And so it felt less possible. Mm-hmm. And so I think for young kids to see those players representing Canada at the World Cup, younger Daniel would just be like stars and hearts in my eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. I have that conversation every session that I've had since the World Cup has started. I've always asked the players, like, what was your favorite game today? And then they will go off on a tangent. They're talking. I saw this player, this, that, and the third. They love it. And I feel like since it's in North America, more people are tuning in and more casuals are tuning in, which is really nice to see. But I completely agree with you. When I was younger, I think Canada has been in one World Cup before Qatar, and it was like my dad's generation. So not seeing that in front of you, it's like, how can you get there? But I ignored that like like the plague, is you just want to think that you are the exception, you are going to be the one to make it. But in reality, the numbers say otherwise for everybody in this situation. You got to be the 1%, and then the 1% of the 1% are at the World Cup right now. So it's just something to think about. But in retrospect, seeing Canada there now, it's just amazing. Kids are loving it.
So outside of Canada winning the World Cup, who are you hoping wins?
You see, like I'm just a soccer fanatic. So like I have different teams for different reasons. I want Ronaldo to win a World Cup because I love Ronaldo. Then I think about Neymar, and I'm like, Brazil hasn't had much glory in a while. And I'm like, Neymar could get one too. But then growing up, my favorite player was Rashford. So I'm like, England can get one as well. But we're just going to roll with Canada because that's a mouthful.
Totally fair. So I'm intrigued because there's the age-old debate, and we don't have to have the discussion of which player, Ronaldo or Messi. But what made Ronaldo your favorite player?
I think that Messi is such a gifted player, naturally gifted, and Ronaldo is the epitome of grit and desire and hard work. And I was more on the physical side compared to the technical when I was a player. So I could admire Ronaldo and his hard work and his physique and his regimen and the time that he put in. Not saying Messi didn't put in the time, because I know he did. But it was very evident with Ronaldo, and I fell in love with that. He is a great example of just how to take care of your mind and body. And there's a reason he's 40 starting in a World Cup right now. and other players are not.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the big reasons why he became my favorite player as well. And, you know, hearing the stories as a Man United fan, so obviously watching it very closely, but hearing the stories of how he transformed is incredible. And then seeing him do it on the pitch, moving from a number 7 to a number 9 when he went to Real Madrid, you know, and then continuously evolving as a player, as, you know, he recognizes he's a step behind. Okay, I have to evolve my game. And the discipline and the humility. You know, he's often accused of, you know, being cocky. He can't be. Yeah. You cannot reach that level without having a ton of humility.
Absolutely.
Now, you have to have a ton of self-belief, which they're misattributing to being cocky. But the humility he has to have, even after winning Ballon d'Ors, he has to have so much humility to be like, okay, I'm a step behind now. I have to evolve my game to become this type of a player, to be this type of a player. And then now I got to spend more time focusing on those things so I can level up my game consistently. That's incredible.
It is. It is. And it's funny, I saw a video today from one of the after-game talk shows, and a player named Lalas, an American player, was speaking, and he said that France looked arrogant in the first half. And Zlatan said that ignorant people think that confidence is arrogance. And I feel like there's some truth in that. Ronaldo is absolutely a confident player, and because he's so good, looks arrogant. He models, he has a big physique, he takes his shirt off all the time. Like, everybody can think of whatever you want about Ronaldo, but just like you said, he needs an incredible amount of humility to know what to train, to know his deficiencies, and to get to work. And he did that countless times.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, you bring up Zlatan, another guy that's been accused of the same thing. And that does not tell the whole picture.
Yeah.
And the amount of self-confidence they have to have is so beyond what we're accustomed to that we just can't imagine it, because they contend with the tabloids, you know, the negative press, all of those things. Well, you have to build up enough self-confidence to offset that, right? To not let that break through the gates of everything inside of you. And so you might have a bit of an exterior, or, you know, make jokes the way Zlatan does about almost being God-esque, which is really, it's, you know, a distraction of the thing itself, and it's a persona, and I think it's awesome. But yeah, deep down, you can't get to that level without humility. No. You know, one of the attributes that we talked about before getting on the mic, you want to become good at anything, develop humility. Develop humility, because you have to look really hard at yourself and see all the things that you're not good at. And then you got to get to work.
Get to work. That's it. Yeah, I love that. But that's why I'm a Ronaldo fan. Messi, yesterday, with his hat trick, he showed again that he is unbelievable. But personally, I like Cristiano.
Yeah, me too. Actually, you had brought something up about players watching games and you engaging with them about the games. So when I was growing up, I didn't have a family that was a soccer family, not even an athletic family, really. And so one of my coaches told me, you need to start watching games.
Yeah.
And that's how I became a Man United fan. I was a right back at the time, Gary Neville, David Beckham on the right side. And so I started, you know, I was really just looking for right backs and Gary Neville at the time. And so that's sort of how I ended up falling in love with Man United. That being said, as a coach, how important is it for your young players to actually watch the game?
It is huge. It's huge. And I don't think enough players are watching games nowadays because, one, people don't have cable like they used to. And two, the games, you have to have a subscription to watch. So I can't necessarily expect my 8-year-olds to turn on the game on a Sunday morning and watch Prem when they need to explain to their parents that you need to sign up for DAZN or Fubo and get me a subscription so I can watch the games. I've seen a decline in how much players are watching the sport over the past 5 years. I've seen it. I'll ask them, and you'll have 2 out of your team that consistently watch games. and aren't on their phone scrolling while it's on. And you can see the difference. It's funny because I coached against a team and their coach pulled off their player and said, "You guys aren't playing FIFA anymore. I can tell." Because they just, I don't know. I don't know what he was trying to explain, but I thought that was funny, and it's also the truth. FIFA was a way that we were learning more about the game. I could tell you every single country flag because of FIFA. And then you're getting to try different things in a creative way. And I think it helped me a lot as a player. And I don't think players are watching or even playing FIFA as much anymore, which changes the understanding and their game IQ that they have.
Yeah, one of the biggest things is game IQ. And I didn't fully appreciate it until I got a little bit older, and understanding that there's a real gap for those that don't take that seriously. Understanding the movements, and that really the game it's a game of chess. Mm-hmm. There's so much about it that is akin to playing chess. And, once you can understand that and you can see that as you're playing on the pitch. Now, for an 8-year-old, of course, that's not going to be the case. They're not going to liken it to that, and maybe have never played chess. And that's fine. But you start somewhere by building, an inventory of games that you've seen, players that you're seeing. What are they doing well? What are they not doing well? Oh, look, they messed that up. I remember coach saying that you need to do this or you need to do this. Oh, they're not tracking back? Wow, they just lost the ball. Yeah, that looks bad. I lose the ball, I'm going to track back. I don't want to look like that. And all of those things end up reinforcing the things that you're probably teaching them day in and day out. They'll see it live, and also understanding, even at the highest level, they're not perfect, but how they respond to mistakes on the field is critically important.
It's huge. And I think I lean on my background in education when I'm teaching kids, because as a teacher or an educator, you need to understand that you're going to have 30 kids in a classroom with 30 different learning needs. It's the same on the field. And a lot of coaches are like, if you don't get it, you're done. But when you're coaching grassroots, that can't be the situation. So I have to figure out how my players learn the best. I need to incorporate ways where information resonates with them. And for some players, that might be watching more games. Some players, that might be going to a wall and smashing the ball off of it to work on their first touch. But you need to figure out how your player learns in the best way possible to make them develop, or they're just not going to take any information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what makes a really great coach. I liken it to one of the things that, we do in our business, like my core business, right? There's a lot of circuitry, whether it's electrical, fire alarm, and those that understand the big picture, how circuitry works, when something breaks and it's frayed and there's a deficiency, but we can't find where it is, they can go in and they can troubleshoot it because they understand the big picture. And so for coaches, that's what you're doing. You're troubleshooting, where are they going wrong? What is the mechanism that's happening that's not allowing them? Because it might be a bad pass on the surface, but there's something underneath that might be holding them back, and that's your job to unlock. And that's interesting that you bring that up about your teaching experience and learning through that process and bringing those two worlds together.
Yeah, I feel like that's where a lot of my success has been in coaching. I think the way that I coach resonates with the kids, and that's because I don't coach the same way with the same players and the same teams. Every team needs a different form of education. Some kids, I have to use gamification to keep them engaged, the younger kids. And then you get older and it's like, okay, I need them to be switched on and they start slow. I need to use problem-based learning so that they can solve a problem and they're going to come to me with an answer that I needed them to fish out. So education, as a coach, you should never not be learning. And I think that's another thing that I don't see a lot. Everybody knows everything, but that's just not the truth. And I'm so young in my coaching career that I can't be ignorant to the fact that there is so much I don't know, but there's a lot that I do know. So let me play to my strengths and let me try to strengthen what I don't know right now.
Absolutely. Do you know the story of Sir Alex Ferguson with Nanny?
Ooh, enlighten me.
Okay, so this is how the story goes. This is, I don't know what year this is probably like mid 2000s or early 2000s. So Nanny, Wayne Rooney, they're playing for Manchester United at this time. Nanny's having a horrible game. One of his worst first halves. They go in the change room and Sir Alex Ferguson is like, I need to get something out of him. He's terrible. But he's sitting beside Wayne Rooney. And he knows if he gives the famous hair dryer treatment to Nanny, Nanny's done.
Switched off.
That's it. But he knows Wayne could take it. And he actually might get better in the second half because of it. So he absolutely rinses Wayne Rooney with the hair dryer, knowing that Nanny's right beside him. And everything that he has an issue with Nanny, he yells at Wayne Rooney for. Nanny goes into the second half, has the best second half of his time at Man United. And Rooney even elevated his game from that.
Nice.
So it's one of the subtle brilliances of Sir Alex Ferguson in that he understood his players so well. And I think that's super important. It's one of the things that, you know, I've been exploring a lot recently, which is like the Pep effect.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like, you know, we sort of deviated because of the Pep effect from, and there's lots of issues within it, but we deviated from like man management and it became all technical and the coaches dictate everything, the managers, even at the highest level. And so there's a bit of a return I'm seeing in the game, especially with the appointment of Michael Carrick to Man United, which is wonderful. But yeah, anyways, I personally have always been a fan of that, both in development and when, you know, you're focusing on results. And so, yeah, how do you see that show up in what you're doing? Because it seems like you're entirely focused or mostly focused on development.
Yeah, development is a word that is so often thrown around. What is development? I'm trying to make good players great. I'm trying to make okay players good and keep going down the list. That's what developing is. But it goes out of the scope of soccer. And I try to focus on their technical aspect at a young age. I try to put them in situations where they can deal with some form of adversity. And I get to know the players on a personal level so I can understand what they need and when they need it. I can tell when a player is having a bad day or something happened at school today. It's evident. But most coaches, they just don't care, or maybe they just don't see it. And then that player is going to come, they're zoned out, they're not going to retain any information, they're not going to have a session worth coming to, all because there was something that went unaddressed. So in terms of man management, I will always, before the session starts, try to converse with the kids, try to banter around with the kids, ask them how their days went, how was the World Cup game they watched, whatever it might be, just to get them in a place where they're comfortable so that they can become uncomfortable when I'm going to start my training session. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm Mr. Nice Guy all the time necessarily, but you need to know who you're tending to and how they're going to benefit on the field. Absolutely. And we were talking at the break briefly about like business, right? And the same things are true in business, right? You know, I've spent so many years coaching and of course being a player. All of the things I had to do as a coach are the exact same things I do running a company. I have leaders. I'm a coach. I set forth a game plan. We work towards the game plan. We have to perform collectively as a team within the game plan. And it's my job to walk around the office every once in a while and have just general conversations with all of the people in the office whenever I can. Because when things go wrong, and they always do, understanding what people are going through and having empathy for that, it's foundational to being a coach. Again, whether you're a business leader, a soccer coach, or you know, you're a leader within the military, first responder, it doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. Mm-hmm. Fundamentally, it's the same thing. You need to understand the people because you can't do any troubleshooting without knowing what's going on in their life. Mm-hmm. And things are going to go wrong
extreme ownership. It's on you as the leader to figure it out.
Yeah. And yeah, that's part of the fun part about coaching, to be honest. It's so many personalities. And as a young adult now, I am learning so much about myself because I remember being in their shoes. I remember what it was like to be excited for training and be excited for tournaments and games. And when coach would take interest in something that we were all interested in or knew something that we all knew. So I hold that with a lot of responsibility because I don't want to necessarily send kids home in a bad mood. There are times where I have to be hard. I have to be the mean cop. But that doesn't mean that it always has to be on that basis. And I see a lot of coaches that's it. That's their MO. You come, you should leave pissed off. That's how I know you're improving, but that's not the case. And those players are the ones who are going to struggle when they're in a different environment or they're not being pushed by a coach, and it has to come from them. So I try to put a lot of the onus onto my players so that whether they're with me, with another coach, hopefully at a higher level, they don't need the coach to be the one to push them, because most coaches, when you're in college, if you're not working yourself, you're done.
Yeah, exactly. Once you're at that level, they don't want to be the motivator. They have to bring people together. They have to understand you, but they don't want to be motivating you to get to training, to do the work on your own. And I think that's really important. And it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, where you had a coach that believed in you. Mm-hmm. That was the motivation. Yep. It wasn't someone coming behind you and screaming at you. Even if there's moments if like you need to snap out of it. You know, there's a very fine, small place for that. But most of the time, I look back at my coaches, I've had coaches that would scream incessantly at me. To the point, as a teenager, I'm crying. Yeah. Like, just brutal. It made joining the military easy.
Yeah, I bet.
Because I was like, all right, I already had a guy screaming in my face all the time. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think the coaches I had that believed in us, that believed in me, that changed everything. I wish I could go back in time and I could intentionally put myself in environments where I was almost exclusively with coaches that believed in you and took that approach to understand you. I think it would have made a world of a difference for me.
I think it would have made the difference for me as well. And I try to have these conversations with players because on a team of 20 or on a team of 15, whatever it is, you're going to have players who are not at the same level of the majority. If you are, as a coach, are going to release that player at the end of the season, you need to give them enough information to where they don't feel like, oh, I'm just a crappy soccer player and I should stop this sport. You say, no, look, like, you have your strengths. This is what you should work on, and this is why you're not going to be a part of this team next year. And I think at times when I was released, it was just kind of like cleaning your hands, like, see you later. Like, and then I'm thinking in my head as a kid, like, I am not good enough, or that maybe I shouldn't be playing anymore. So just like you're saying, I think it's really important that the conversations are had, and regardless of the level, you should be the motivator and the belief team for these kids, because they're kids.
Absolutely. And I think something that's important too, and this is effectively what you're doing with the coaching style that you're talking about. Every player needs to understand that there's things that are within their control and there's things that are not. Mm-hmm. An example of this for me, when I was 16, I went on trials with Dundee United in Scotland. Basically, it was, my stature is an issue. I'm quite short. But technically, they were very happy with how I performed in the 2 weeks that I was there, but I wasn't going to sign. Yep. Fine, no worries. I took that pretty hard because I felt like, well, I can't control my stature. And I remember coming home and thinking about it, and I was like, well, what can I do? So immediately I got a gym membership, because back then they were telling you couldn't work out and get stronger because it would stunt your growth. Well, clearly my growth was stunted. I don't know why they told us that back then, but they said if if you're lifting weights, it's going to stunt your growth. I didn't, and didn't matter. So then I started to then, and I started working with a track coach.
Nice.
So I could increase my speed. Fast forward 2 years, I'm in the south of France, and in lateral speed and movement, no one could touch me. But at that time, I was devastated. And so taking the feedback as a player is one of the most important jobs that you can do.
Yeah.
And helping them see what they can control. I just got the feedback like, hey, your stature is an issue. Okay, fine. But it wasn't, and this is what you can do about it. I had to figure that out on my own.
Yeah.
And so how do you deal with that? How do you work through that with your players and help them see, like, there might be things that they can't work on or things that are out of their control in the moment, whether a coach that they're playing with doesn't particularly like them or whatever, and understanding that, but there are these things. You focus on those, and over time, it'll change the trajectory.
I try to make sure that I'm the mediator in it, and it's not the parent necessarily, because things get lost in translation. So I will face it head on, have a conversation with the kid and say, look, your peers are very good at this right now, and you are struggling with it. This is what you can do to work on it. If you do, you'll see a difference. Or if you do, you will reap the benefits of it and likely play more. But if you don't, you're going to stay the same. And to tie it back to that elitist coaching mindset to where the coach is untouchable, that is to the detriment of the player, because parents are now giving the player feedback that they don't have any idea on what it's based on. And that's when you have players start resenting coaches. That's when you have players start resenting the sport, because your dad, who does not have any background, is now telling you, yeah, coach doesn't like you as a player, and he thinks that you're not very good. Okay, I'm 12. What do I do with that information? Probably don't want to play for this coach anymore. So when I show up, I'm going to be disengaged. So I try to go directly to the player and get on their level so that they can take that information, and then it's up to them. I put the onus onto them, not the parent. I can tell a parent, yeah, Billy needs to go and do keep-ups all night, and he still might not do it, or the parent might not tell Billy to do it. But if I go to the kid and I give him a reason and a way to get better, and he doesn't do it, then there's no excuse. And the nice part about it is parents will share with me the difference. I've been seeing him do more training at home. He's been more excited to come to training because he has something to work on and something to work for. So as you said before, with like parents and coaches, sometimes the information needs to come from the coach and not the parent, because the parent is the parent and the coach is the coach.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And being able to, that's a gift that you get to give those families, because it does become hard to differentiate when is my parent being a parent and when are they being my coach. And to allow them to be able to separate those things is really, really beautiful. I can say that as a parent.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I was thinking about, sort of circling back to the benefits of playing and the things that you learn. This is kind of for the kids and the parents listening. One of the beautiful things you can learn in the game is delayed gratification, because that transcends everything. So if you were to break it down for anyone listening, and we kind of touched on it a bit, but the realities of that delayed gratification, what does it look like and what does it mean?
I think, going off of my experience, my delayed gratification was the hours that I had to put in by myself to get that one moment of reaping the benefits of that work. Delayed gratification in soccer might be if you're not playing a lot and you want to know why, you speak with your coach, you have to do the work. The work is not fun. Nobody likes to do the work. I didn't like to do the work. But if you put it in, you will see the benefits. And once that work has been put in, there's your gratification, that you got that goal. You're playing more. You're training better. That is it. It's not going to be an overnight fix. And I recently had a family who wanted to book private sessions for their child. Great. I think that they could benefit from it. They wanted to cram them all in. And I was trying to explain to them that I can do that if that is what you want, but the benefit of your child will be to space it out so that it is consistent instead of one thing, because the one thing is not going to get you that result that the consistency will over time. It's like, oh, okay, let me think about that. And then they did it, and the kids improved. So that delayed gratification translates to everything in life, but if you can figure it out in soccer and be okay with it, then you are set after this is done.
Yeah, and that's perfectly put. Now, post-career, once you took that jersey off and you're no longer Kairo, the soccer player, now you're coach and you've got a life.
Yeah.
You know, you're in many ways, you're an entrepreneur. So how has the delayed gratification you've learned as a player informed all these other parts of your life today?
I mean, things have come a lot easier because I know that it's the journey that is the fun part. So even with Coach Kairo, my social media page, and I start posting consistently, I have people who are like, what the heck is this guy doing? Like, why is he posting? And you just have to keep going through it. And then it begins to snowball. And once it snowballs, everyone's like, wow, like he would have been dumb to not do this in the first place. So that is my most recent example. But once I stopped playing, it was just a reframe of my mindset to understand that I need to take all of the positive traits from the sport and try to just put it into my day-to-day. And with business, that's a difficult one because when you start, you have all these ideas, it's fresh, you get that boost of energy, and then you get one block and you're like, damn, like I don't know if this is it. But I've been in that situation so many times where I'm like, no, like you got to push through it. Like it's a smoke screen. You got to keep going. And once you get through that bit, it's like, all right, we're here.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, before we wrap it up, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think would be important?
Yeah, let's talk about Ontario soccer.
Let's go.
I would like to address the parents who are at a crossroads when it comes to what the next step is for their child. And OPDL is the quote-unquote top league for young athletes to be in. And I think that parents need to just understand before they jump into whatever level their kid is in, you have to go through a list. And the list should be, what value are you getting from your current situation? What is the relationship that your player has with the coach? Does he feel like he can learn from the coach? Does he feel like he's in an environment that he can grow? And then, are you doing it for the status or are you doing it for their improvement? Because I have a lot of players who are excited about OPDL just to say that they're OPDL. And there's nothing, I'm not bashing OPDL in any way, but if you have a coach that you already are not having a good time with, they haven't had a good pedigree, and they're offering you OPDL and you're like, wow, I'm going to do this, versus going somewhere where you can actually improve and it will help you in the long run, you have to go for the latter.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really important point. And it's something that exists not just here with OPDL and everywhere. When you have a young player on their professional trajectory or whatever they aspire to, you have to decide what moment you're in, because there's different seasons and different chapters of your story. Yeah. And the beginning chapters, everything has to be about development, building your player, building yourself as a player, I should say, and building your child as a player. All of that is development. The decision-making paradigm that you use to decide whether or where you're going to go in development phase is vastly different than if it's like, okay, I need to start thinking about results, what's going to get me the exposure that I need. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of parents, they probably see it as like this, like if I don't get there now, it's gone. The opportunity is going to expire. Fortunately, in the teenage years, that's not the case. And that's also not the case for opportunities abroad.
Exactly.
The opportunities will continue to exist. And so for parents, understanding what season you're in with your child is really important. So with that in mind, what chapters and seasons and sort of in terms of age, maybe, or another metric, what would you use to help parents understand what season they're in so they can better determine whether, like, should I be thinking development? And like, as you described development, I need to focus on getting better. Whatever environment helps me improve, that's where I need to be, regardless of what it looks like or what people think or whatever clout is lost. I can't go to work on Monday and tell my coworkers my child plays here. My child can't put in their social media bio whatever their friends are putting in, and stripping the ego away. Mm-hmm. How can they differentiate that? What metrics would you use?
Yeah, I think that before the age of 14, and nobody wants to hear this, but like, winning is not the priority. Winning is a byproduct of what your players are doing, yes, but you can't be attracted to the flashy winning team. You might not develop as well as if you're with a coach who has your best interest. And with this whole new scope of keeping scores and festivals instead of tournaments, nothing matters until you're about 14, 15, 16. Nothing. You just need to be as good as you possibly can. Where you play does not matter. And I think that is the metric parents need to understand. Like, if your kid is not in high school yet, you just need to focus on them getting as good as they possibly can. And if that means to playing OPDL, then do it. If that means to playing iModel or district or whatever it is, then do that. Because no college coaches are coming to a 14-year-old's game. No professional coach is, in this country at least, is coming to your professional game. And if you are that good, they'll come to you, no matter where you are. So once you get to the high school age, you're 14, 15, 16, that's when you need to have conversations with the coach. Can this guy or girl help me with what my child's goals are? They want to go to school. All right. Do they have connections with post-secondaries in the States and in Canada? No. Maybe I need to find somewhere that does. Or I want to get into the provincial program. The way that Canada Soccer is doing it is they're pigeonholing players to being within the OPDL system to play provincial. So if you really want to play for provincial, you need to be in the OPDL. But nothing before the age of 14, you shouldn't be putting your eggs in one basket and saying, wow, like, if I'm here, like, I'm set for the rest of his youth career. It's just not the case.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And this kind of just came to top of mind. So it's not a fully formed thought, so critique it or add to it. I look at my journey of going to the south of France and how it didn't materialize the way it was supposed to, but what ended up happening. What ended up happening was I was by myself. I had some people help me over there out of the goodness of their hearts, really wonderful people. But basically what I did was I lived there on like nothing. Like I was talking about it last week. I had €6 per day for all 3 meals. €6 per day for a year for all 3 meals. And sometimes I had to use that money for transportation, getting on the bus if I couldn't sneak on, but I didn't do that. And so, but you could do that. Like, parents are always, they're looking for these opportunities, right? And that's where like these coaches in Europe and all that. Now, also recognizing that your child could also be a late developer. I was a late developer. It wasn't until probably 17, 18 that I really, really started to, I still played at the highest level here, but by 17 and 18, that's when I started to, really do well and set myself apart.
Yeah.
And so if that's true for your child, or you're not getting the opportunities you think they deserve, guess what? Once they graduate college, between their ambition, and if you have some financial resources, which you probably do because you're paying for them to play in these programs anyways, and you've been investing in that, which is great and wonderful, tell them, pick a country, go to Europe and have them go play in a semi-pro league. Now they're in it. as an adult, very young adult, at an age where they can actually sign, because your 15-year-old or your 16-year-old can't sign anyways. And all you're doing is flying them there. At the semi-pro level, in France, pick the country, you can just go knock on the door. They'll give you a look. If you get over there and you're young enough, and someone will give you a look. And if you're good enough, they'll sign you. And then you're going to play games locally, and people are there watching at all of the levels. Kind of at the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about Australia. In Europe, all the levels are, you've got opportunities. You go play 5th, 6th division, someone's going to see you.
Yeah.
If you can muscle through that.
Muscling through is the hardest part.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't think the majority would consider doing that. And if they're there, it's like, what am I doing? Because once you get off that plane and you know nobody, believe me, it's like it's just you, yourself, and your thoughts. So if you cannot withstand that, you're calling home, Mom, I need an extra grand, I need to come home. This is not for me. And I think that is the situation. A lot of people don't really want it. They say they do, but they don't want it. So you'll see, though, your peers, some last, some don't. And the players you started playing with at young will not be the same players you finish with. It's just how it goes. Who can survive the longest?
Yeah, beautifully put. And so to circle it back to the OPDL, Ontario Soccer, whatever is said, become a better player. You have a lot of time. There's far more opportunity today than there ever was. If you don't choose to go OPDL at under 15 or 16 or even ever, that's not a death sentence. It's not over. Controllables and uncontrollables. Focus on you getting better. If that's at the forefront of your mind, I just need to keep getting better.
Everything takes care of itself.
Absolutely.
That's it.
All right. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
I think that's about it. That's good.
Awesome, dude. This has been amazing. I really appreciate you sitting down, and I'm really excited to see all the amazing things you're going to keep doing. Hopefully we can get a part 2 in the future.
For sure.
And keep being such a wonderful ambassador and leader for all those young kids, and above all else, keep making amazing people.
Appreciate you, boss. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much, man.